Hello, hello again. My name is Douglas Lummis, and this is session three of a series of little talks uh, entitled "Meditations by a ex by an ex-Marine." The ex-Marine is me, uh, and I want to talk about some of the things I learned in the Marines, and since then teaching about war and violence. Last time, in the last session, session two, I made the case that our value system has within it a very deep and serious contradiction, something that we take for granted, we all know about, but we don't think about. Uh, Sometimes it's important to pick up something that we take for granted as common sense, everyday uh, way of thinking, and turn it around so as to make it seem strange. That's what I'm going to try and do, what I am trying to do about this contradiction in our value system. The contradiction is uh, that we have to teach our children two different things about killing. One, we teach them in accordance to the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill. Killing other human beings is a terrible thing to do, and people who do it should be condemned and punished. On the other hand, blink and you have the war situation in which killing other people is a duty. We don't punish people for it. We honor them for it. Uh, and we teach them how to do it as skillfully as possible. Now, everybody knows that we have those two uh, value systems side by side. Each one of us has one and the other, both of them somehow living together inside our brain, but uh, we don't notice so much that is actually a little bit confusing. I want to talk about some of those confusing aspects. The Bible says, the Old Testament, for those who believe in it, says, thou shalt not kill. The Marine Corps' state take on that, you can understand from the way that they do, the way that I used to do bayonet training. While you're practicing the positions, the various positions of bayonet fighting, the drill instructor shouts, "What's the bayonet for?" And you shout back in chorus, "To kill!" And when you do that, you thrust the bayonet, the rifle with the bayonet and attached to it forward so it will hopefully hit the face of the person that you're confronting. And you do this over and over as one of the many ways that drill instructors teach people that killing is an automatic thing that you just do. Well, it takes that's the form it takes in war. It has several forms, however. The so-called uh, right, the state's right of legitimate violence. So when the state carries out violence, or when its agents carry out violence, that it's legitimate as long as they follow the law. It takes three forms. One is police power, that is the power of a policeman to arrest people and to use violence against them if they're trying to run away, uh, or to use violence to prevent a crime if there's a crime being carried out before their eyes. Uh, and other times, the police have that power. They're not supposed to have the second power, which is the power to punish. The power to punish is held by the judiciary, and that's the power that the judge has to sentence a convicted criminal, a person who's been convicted by a jury or whatever of an actual crime. Hollywood has been trying to teach us for years that the police ought to have or ought to just take on themselves the power to punish. There have been movie after movie that had Dirty Harry or Dirty Harry's surrogates killing the suspect happily and breaking the law, exceeding the authority that a policeman has. A policeman is not supposed to do that. He's supposed to arrest the person and turn them over to the judiciary. American police seem to be forgetting that a lot these days. But anyway, there's the police power, the punitive power, and then the right of belligerency, which is the right to kill people and destroy property and to steal property if it's necessary during war. Uh, Now, these various acts, the one way of understanding the seriousness of this is that if the very same act is carried out by a civilian like you or me, it becomes a crime. It's not a crime if the government agent does it. The government has the right, for example, to force us to pay money, sometimes in the form of taxes or in the form of fines. And if we don't pay it, they can use force to get it. If you and I did that, you or I did that, it would be called extortion. The judiciary has the power to lock people up in iron rooms with locked doors and not let them out, uh, essentially, for, even for years. Uh, that's called imprisonment. If you or I did that, that would be kidnapping. There's a criminal name for it. And in the case of in some cases, the judiciary has the right. No, it always has the right. In some cases, depending on the where you live, uh, it can punish people by killing them. And in the old days, for example, when killed, they executed people, say, with a firing squad, they would put a blank ammunition in one of the rifles, so that each of the executioners could think it wasn't me that did it, it was those other guys. Or if it's some ex execution gadget that requires pushing a button, they prepare various buttons, several buttons, uh, blank buttons, dummy buttons is what I want to say, uh, so that the button pushers can all think it wasn't me. And this indicates that even though the state executioner understands that this is legal, killing this person is not my responsibility. It's the state that has the power to do this, and I'm just its agent, and so on and so forth, and I won't be arrested and I won't be criticized. Still, uh, the pusher of these buttons or the firing even of the uh, rifles, blank ammunition rifles, is subject to nightmares, bad dreams, uh, panic attacks, sudden returns of memory, the same symptoms of PTSD that war veterans so often have. And to the soldiers, this is also very confusing because, on the one hand, there's duty bound to kill as many of the enemies as possible, but uh, they're also bound not to kill their fellow soldiers or their officers or other people who are not soldiers even though they're on the other side, or prisoners, or they're not supposed to kill prisoners. There's all these delicate points where it could be one way or it could be the other. And a soldier in the field can make a mistake and think that it's legal to kill this prisoner, uh, and do it and suddenly become a war criminal and be punished for doing it. It's a very fine line in actual war between who you can kill and who you can't. And as a matter of fact, when war gets extreme and desperate, soldiers in all uh, military organizations sometimes kill each other or kill their officers when it seems like the only way out. Uh, with a very slight error, war turns into murder. Now, I talked about that last time in the last session. Uh, what I want to talk about is today is where does the state get this right? By what reasoning or what route? Who says the state has this right of violence. Uh, the philosopher Thomas Hobbes said famously, we give it to the state. We, the people, we, the citizens, grant this right to the state. We accept it. We say we want you to have this right. And that's the social contract. And usually when people hear that, their first response is, I don't remember making any such promise or any such offer or a request. When the hell did this uh, social contract happen? I don't see it recorded in history. It's very, very rare, almost a non-event when people uh, get together and say, okay, here you are, state, you got your right of uh, legitimate violence. We give it to you. But okay, that never happened. That's a myth that we use to explain it to ourselves. But you can say that at least by our behavior, even we who have never given any such thing to the state, by our behavior, we accept that the state has it. We uh, we accept it. We don't doubt it. If there's a burglar comes to our house, we call the police and use the state violence to take care of it. It's all part of our daily life. But okay, so why? By what reasoning? Why is it that we accept this? And I think that also the answer is something that everybody knows, even though you might not have uh, particularly thought about it. It is that we believe that the state will, like a good fellow, use this power to protect us. It will use this power to protect us from violence. Without the state having this power, uh, society would be just too dangerous. Everybody would be killing everybody. And so we give this power to the state, believing that the state will reduce the number of violent deaths in the society. It will protect us against foreigners. It will use our military to protect us from foreigners, other countries that might want to invade, or we'll use the police and the judiciary to protect us from each other because we can't be trusted to treat each other properly unless we're forced to do it by state violence. So the promise is with this uh, monopoly of legitimate violence, the state will protect us and lower the level of violence in our society. Now, when Thomas Hobbes uh, first presented this idea, it was a hypothesis. It wasn't something, it was not a fact, it was not something that existed in his time. It's he is saying if we create a state built on this principle, it will be safer than otherwise. Sovereign power is not so hurtful as the want of it, is the way Hobbes put it. It's not a utopia, it's not absolutely peaceful, but it's safer than the alternative. Now, that's not a stupid idea. It's rational. It makes a certain kind of sense, but there's still a question to be asked, and that is it true? Is it really true? Does the state protect us and reduce the amount of violence? Well, we can think of it this way. Uh, we can do a mental experiment thinking of the 20th century. The 20th century is like, among other things, the century the century of the nation state, the century in which most of the world shifted over from many, many, many forms of government to the form of government called the nation state, the sovereign state uh, that has this monopoly of legitimate violence. Okay? And according to the historians, in 1900, the beginning of the 20th century, in 1900, there were about 50 such states, about 50 sovereign states. Uh, it depends on, again, how you count, but around that many. And in 2000, at the end of the century, there were 200. So during the century, the 20th century, about 150 new sovereign states were formed. Okay, so this is like a 100-year world scale experiment testing Thomas Hobbes' hypothesis. If the world is organized along these lines, with each group under the authority of a sovereign state that monopolizes legitimate violence, will it become more peaceful or not? Well, even to ask the question answers itself. The 20th century is probably the bloodiest, no, not probably, let me say certainly, the bloodiest century in the history of mankind. Statistically, okay, how many war deaths were there in the 20th century? Think of all the wars. To start with, the historians say that there is no year in the 20th century in which there was no war anywhere. Someplace there has always been war. And in too many cases, there have been gigantic wars. The First World War, the Second World War, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, countless wars everywhere. So, how many people were killed in these wars? Well, statistics are pretty hard to come by when you're talking about war. Uh, so many of the people killed were anonymous and never, no record. So everybody's guessing. But I found two a lower and a higher estimation. One statistics group says there's 187 million deaths. I'll say it again, 187 million. That's the low estimate. And there's a higher estimate, 231 million deaths. Now, numbers like that have very little impact because it goes beyond our imagination. You hear that and it's just, yeah, okay. It's just a sound. But that's not all there is to it. Not all the killings by the state are war. Uh, Remember that many of these states, these new states especially, but some of the old ones as well, uh, are totalitarianisms, totalitarian states, dictatorships, uh, very, very cruel 1984 type of states. They do a lot of killing other than the killing uh, in war with their neighbors. Well, one of the there's for one thing, they're often at war with their own people. Many of the wars are wars between the state and its people or part of its people. And for another, many of them are not even war, but just murder or genocide or uh, disappearings, uh, just plain murders, killing the enemies of the state or the rebels against the state or the people who don't agree with the state or people of the wrong religion and so on and so forth. So a very interesting political scientist named R.J. Rummel heroically spent his career counting the bodies of people killed by the state. How many people, he said, he asked, has the state killed in the 20th century, uh, aside from uh, just war? And his answer is, I've got it written down here. Yeah, 262 million of these deaths. He coined an expression to describe them. He calls this democide. Demos for the people, the same as the demos of democracy. Democide, meaning just killing people, not because of their, not because of this, not because of that, not because of the other thing, just killing people. And he understood that it's very hard to imagine, to get an image, what 262 million bodies would look like. So he kindly provided an image to think about. He said that if you line up these bodies, assuming they're an average of uh, 5 feet tall, 5 feet tall sounds rather short until you remember that in the average, there are lots of babies and children who bring the bring the height, average height down. If you line them up head to toe, they will circumvent the Earth 10 times. Okay? That many bodies in 100 years. Now, you maybe it could be that uh, R.J. Rummel is a bit of a crackpot or a great exaggerator, and we should take his figures with a grain of salt. So let's try that. Let's say, let's just say, let's cut it by half. So it's a line of bodies that goes around the Earth only 5 times. It doesn't help, right? It is the horror doesn't diminish one bit. Uh, Rummel coined the expression democide. I have coined another phrase uh, to capture a kind of war that people don't seem to notice, and that is the primal war of the state. The primal war of the state means the war that the state fights to establish itself. Uh, Thomas Hobbes wanted to believe that the state would found itself through a peaceful social contract. People would somehow gather together and agree and promise, make a great political promise to behave in a certain way. Uh, but it's not, that happens, as I said, very rarely, if at all. What happens is somebody declares themselves the state, l'état, c'est moi, declares themselves the state, and then some people say, no, you're not, we don't accept that, and a war begins. And some people support one side, and some people support the other side, and whoever wins becomes the state. And then when the state founds itself in this manner by winning a war, it uses the same method to protect itself and to maintain itself. And so it's in a constant or remittent war against its people or part of its people to protect itself. So it's constantly, as a dictatorship will do, uh, fighting wars against rebels or dissidents or critics or whatever, or people of a different religion, whatever they don't like. Uh, and this is what builds up the democide. Uh, this plus, of course, wars with other countries uh, builds up the democide number. So this experiment, this great experiment of the 20th century, continuing through now, of trying to protect ourselves by establishing and supporting a sovereign state with the right of legitimate violence, a monopoly of that right. This is not working well. It is not yielding the result that we wish that it would. This is something we got to think about. Now, people who support the state and say you should always support the state and no other principle call themselves realists and label people who try to think of some alternative as dreamers. But I agree with the idea that we should be realists, of course. And when we're talking about violent death, everybody should be a realist about trying to avoid that. So, in this case, thinking about the state, being a realist means looking at reality. And the reality that matters in this case is the historical record. And the historical record is what I just talked about in a very abbreviated way. The record, the modern history of starting, say, in 1900. It's a bloody mess. It is not uh, the, the peaceful world that we need. And rather, it strikes me that the people who think, okay, some people will tell you, okay, yeah, yeah, up to now, the state has behaved like that. But from now, it's going to be nice. It's going to be fair. Well, that's what I call state romanticism. That is an absolutely unrealistic, romantic way to look at the state. The dream of the patriot, the state is going to treat me well. Good luck with that. Uh, okay, I'll have more to talk about in the next session. So, see you later.